I was going to call this video why I am not going to talk about Rory Sutherland. Rory Sutherland, as you probably know if you're on YouTube, is the ubiquitous marketing guru, a very big man and proud of it, constantly vaping, who used to work for Ogilvy and now kind of does talks about marketing. He's very old-fashioned and he's an amiable guy. He's a very affable guy. You know, he's the sort of guy you'd love to go and have a drink with in the pub. He's the Farage of the marketing world, if you like. But he has managed to make a career. He's very old-fashioned. In other words, most of his marketing comes from the idea pre the internet, really, where, if you wanted to advertise your brand, you would go to an advertising agency and they would charge a lot of money in order to kind of make you a slick or funny or witty advert, like the Barclaycard adverts. Do you remember those? With Rowan Atkinson. And they would try and do something like that and raise your brand profile or whatever. And it doesn't really work like that. Any of you who've watched Dragon's Den will know that, because there's this guy on there who is the host of yet another podcast, because everybody now has a podcast. I can't remember his name because I've got dementia, but he does the Diary of a CEO. He's the young guy, the marketing guy, the internet guru, and he's always saying about how marketing has changed now and that, using the tools of the internet and social media, he can make any brand great, pretty much. Whereas Rory Sutherland, he's very old school and he likes to talk about the old days, really. And he's managed to carve a very, very successful career just being on social media in one form or another, basically being on podcasts and so forth. And rather like all of the rest of them, he does it with about 3 anecdotes. He's got 3 anecdotes. Now, I'm not talking about Rory Sutherland today. And it's not to do with sort of trying to, illuminate some of the madness of what's going on, because, he gets millions and millions of viewers while he repeats over the last decade or so these 3 marketing anecdotes, these stories. Now, actually, if you analyse his stories line by line, word by word, really listen carefully, you'll find that, as always, they're contentious. I'll give you one example. He seems to think that we're all kind of under the illusion that dry toilet paper is normal, but he says the natural toilet paper to use would be a damp, wet, sort of baby type toilet paper, and he thinks this is all because of the way that toilet paper's been marketed, because there's only dry toilet papers on the shelves, and he points out that the wet, if there was wet paper on all the shelves, we would immediately start thinking, why have we been using dry toilet paper all these years? But actually, if you think about it, what he said, and he talks about it with that authoritarian drone, just like the rest of them do, as if they've got some kind of finger on the pulse of reality. And I say, Rory, you're being contentious with every word you speak, and you're out of date. Because I don't think that wet toilet paper actually is the solution. I actually think that could cause a lot of trouble. And I think it's dry for a reason. But I'm not going to talk about Rory. Why am I not talking about Rory Sutherland? And if I was going to talk about Rory Sutherland, what would I be talking about? Would I be talking about the fact that he has managed to make a very good career out of 3 anecdotes, all of which are contentious? Am I going to talk about what an affable chap he is and how I'd love to go for a pint with him down, as long as... No, that wasn't the reason I was going to talk about Rory Sutherland. I was going to talk about Rory Sutherland because of my new series, which is I'm going to call Have We Reached Peak Stupidity? And it's going to be an occasional feature. Any of you are familiar with Alan Partridge, Steve Coogan. He used to have a show on TV. I think it was called The Alan Partridge Show, and it was a spoof kind of interview show. And he used to have an occasional feature on it called Alan's Big Pocket. And I feel I'm carrying on the tradition of that. Or indeed, Ricky Gervais and Carl Pilkington and Steve Merchant used to have a feature on their podcast, I think, called Rockbusters or Monkey News. Things like that. You know, it's in that tradition. So it's not going to be a regular thing, but occasionally, have we reached peak stupidity? Now, of course, I'm not giving the game away when I tell you that we have reached peak stupidity, and we're reaching it every, you know, the bar is getting higher and higher every day. In fact, not every day even, just like every few seconds. The reason I'm not going to talk about Rory Sutherland today is simply because we're coming into the new year. You know, there has to be some hope. Like, I can't just keep going on illuminating the accelerating process into a chronicling the post-human world, which I say has already happened, and I say it's got nothing to do with anything clever. Just look around you, you know, use the eyes, use the ears. You know it's there. You know it's already happened. We're just in the clouds about it. But yeah, so the reason I was going to talk about Rory Sutherland was because I want to make him the honorary recipient of my first Peak Stupidity Award. Now, Peak Stupidity normally is to do with an idea that somebody has that is so ridiculous that you kind of feel that it's the end of the world. You know, you really want the sun to go into a supernova situation and just swallow up the Earth. I mean, what would be better if it was like a neutron bomb and it just annihilated human beings and sort of left the hedgehogs and the birds and the seals and the monkeys, just if it didn't harm them. But you see, this is what Rory Sutherland, he's got me onto this. So, I wanted to start the new year not going on about Rory Sutherland and peak stupidity. It seems unfair, or it seems mean-minded, and it's not. I want to try and. We all know that the world's gone to hell in a handcart. You only have to look at today's newspaper, and you kind of know what's going on. I think. Well, we all do. But I wanted to be a bit more positive, really. But I couldn't think of anything as usual. And people are trying to be positive, aren't they? It's the first few days of the year. I noticed that in the gym here, it was absolutely packed. 1st of January, 9 o'clock in the morning, absolutely packed with people. You couldn't hardly get on a machine. No, there's no one in there. Normally, it's a little bit cold. Well, it's not cobwebby because they do keep it very clean here because they have Albanian cleaners who come in and do it. So they're all in there. But what's the psychology behind that, isn't it? I mean, I suppose that, is it because you've eaten too much over Christmas? They're all quite young in there. They're not kind of old people who look like they're out of shape or anything, or overweight or anything like that. They're kind of studenty, actually. And maybe they're the young generation who are into fitness much more than we were. But again, it seems slightly desperate to me that it's suddenly so crowded. What are they trying to achieve? It's a desperation. They must have been waiting for that 1st of January, the kind of, the signal to kind of reboot in some way. Well, good luck to them. But, this is why it's all a coping strategy. Why can't, you don't see the birds out there and trying to reboot themselves every 1st of January, do you? And say, I've got to get my act together. Why are we we're obsessed? We've got to get our act together. Got to get our act together. Where does it come from? I mean, if you bring it right down to kind of raw reality, it's about functioning well in the real world and surviving. And in order to function well, it's true that you do have to be healthy. So I guess it's about functionality. And that's why they're in there on the rowing machine and the treadmill and that elliptical machine and the weights. But I'd be embarrassed to go in there with all of them. Hi, I'm another guy who's like panicking about my health on the 1st of January. But anyway, never mind. Look, so You probably want to know what Rory Sutherland's idea was that made him to be sort of the peak stupid idea of the year. But I've got to give you some background. Why are the people who have the power and the money at the moment so obsessed with tearing down all educational institutions? They despise higher education colleges. They despise universities. They hate anybody who is academically educated. And they want to destroy them, and they will try and destroy them in any way they can. The Trump MAGA movement at the top of the White House, the puritanical cleansers, as they see themselves, of American society, have declared war on the universities. And you will find more and more people trying to tear down the institution of higher education across particularly the Anglo-Saxon world. Of course, these institutions are still considered to be noble and of real value, and actually vital to the economy and to the sanity of the system in most places. But in fat America and the fat UK, where we feel that we can kind of cruise on our past somehow, we're happy to let them sort of deteriorate. Why is this going on? Well, let's look at 3 people on social media who have pretty much the biggest draw of fans. So people who are getting 10 million plus hits. So we're talking about, first, obviously, I really didn't want to mention his name. I mean, it's the beginning of the year. And I'm not going to mention his name, actually. I refuse to, but his initials are JP. Now, JP, who actually was an academic at one point, many years ago, before he decided to become a kind of crazy guy, because he'd read, the Gulag Archipelago and Crime and Punishment, he suddenly thought that he had he thought he had the secret to the universe, because he'd read these books, some books that a lot of sixth formers have read many years ago, and had just assimilated into their kind of knowledge base, their philosophy of life. But no, for him, they were revelations. If I ever hear him talking about Cain and Abel again, or order and chaos, I will shoot myself. Anyway, now, he despises universities. He hates them. He hates them. He thinks they're a waste of time. I mean, you know what he thinks. He thinks they're kind of, well, he doesn't really think this, but this is, his mental illness has taken him to a place where he thinks they're kind of Marxist breeding grounds. And he's got absolutely no idea. It's completely ridiculous. But, I mean, I went to university. Everybody I know went to university pretty much. And, because it was in the time when many people did go to university, and it was no big deal, But I'm telling you, most people went into university as kind of, in terms of pure knowledge, naive, and they came out the other end generally with a set of tools and skills and knowledge that would enable them to make the world a better place. I think, but if you're one of those people that despises people who are educated for some reason, that's fine, okay, but I don't. So he doesn't like universities, and the universities don't like him, and so when he was going through his when he was trying to sort of capitalize on his newfound fame as a sort of anti-woke, anti-university kind of champion, he came up with this idea, and he said that he was going to start a new kind of universal education university, and it was basically the JP University. And he went into some detail about this. And basically there was going to be no curriculum. There was just going to be a book list. In other words, JP was going to select his top 10 books, all right? and think that if people read these, they would be able to understand the world and man and how it is. I mean, the idea would have been, if I'd have been doing this peak stupidity idea 5 years ago or 10 years ago, whenever it was he came up with this idea, he would have easily won. The idea, you know, when I look back at my life as a student, the idea that instead of getting the education I had and the experiences I had in an old building in London, you know, with some great old minds and being introduced to sort of, you know, research papers and topics and things, if I'd have thought that all I needed to do was lie on the bed and read Cain and Abel, the Gulag Archipelago, Pinocchio, and Crime and Punishment, you know, would have saved me 4 years or 5 years. Terrible idea. So he hates them. Elon Musk, he wants to bring the universities down, and he said it clearly as well. He's very patronising about the whole thing. So he kind of says, well, I think if you want to just have fun for 3 years, yeah, go to university. If you want to kind of hang out with girls, go to university. But if you want knowledge, I mean, you can get the knowledge anywhere else from anywhere. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, big deal. Yes, knowledge exists. There is a thing called the New York Library. You could walk into the New York Library and you could spend a decade in there and you could read every single book that's in there. Big deal. You know, education kind of it's a different approach to knowledge than just throwing facts at you. But, you know, this is the way the world's going. We started calling it dumbing down about 30 years ago, and now, well, if you've seen any of my other videos, you know what I think. In effect, the reason that nobody wants, these people don't want anybody to go to university or be educated and to have the knowledge is because it's simply not, they think of it as another power center. If you know something, you become another power block. And they don't want it. That's the real reason they're doing it. You know, if these people are funneling off billions and billions of euros and dollars and pounds, then what they want is a kind of, they want like a personal military, really. I mean, in the military, you're just told what to think and told what to do, aren't you? In the military, basically. You're told what to think and you're told what to do. And that's what they want. That's what they want of us. They don't want another power base. They don't want people to actually be educated, and they don't want people to basically to assemble in groups. You know I'm sounding a little bit like some weirdo from like a conspiracy theorist, but I mean, you know, this is actually what is happening. You know, only have to open your newspaper and find out what the latest executive order is or the latest crazy idea is, to see that, in fact, I'm underplaying it. I'm underplaying it because there's no such thing as free speech. If I actually said what I thought, then I would be, I'd be kicked off this and all sorts of things, because I'm not really allowed to say what I think. I can only go so far. For example, I'd like to swear my head off. I'm not allowed to do that. I'd like, you know, I would like these people to be put on trial, but you're not allowed to say that. The thing about having money is that you're immune. If you have a lot of money, you're immune from most of the world's little troubles. And so you can easily afford litigation against anybody who says anything. So JP, on the record, wants to get rid of universities. Elon Musk, on the record, wants to get rid of universities. Thinks they're stupid. And I've said why I think they think these things. So Rory Sutherland, who I really don't want to talk about today, but actually I've now decided it's best to get it out of the way. You know, I'll probably put a picture of him on this thumbnail. I don't want to be too rude about the guy. He's very amiable, affable. But, you know, if he's going to come up with an idea as stupid as this, then I just got to call it out. So Rory Sutherland, his great idea. You might agree with this idea, by the way. You might agree with this, but this is my opportunity to tell you what I think. And I don't agree with you, with it. And I think it might well be the most stupid idea I've ever heard in my life. Based on my experiences and based on what I just consider to be the reality of the situation and purely rational, pragmatic look at the words that he says, I think it is peak stupidity. And and also the thing is that, it's reinforcing the inevitable accelerating rise of AI, posthumanism, social media, a very different world. Okay, I've lost myself. Sorry, it's early. Okay, so what did he say? Sometimes I feel like rambling until there's nobody watching. It's nice to just be at your own. It's nice to be on your own at the end of a long rambling video. You almost know that nobody is still watching. And your shoulders can relax a little bit, And yeah. So what he said was, he had this great idea and he was really proud of this idea. He's a big guy with these big red braces. He's constantly smoking. He's on a vaping machine all the time. And he slips into his chair. He molds around the chair. He's really big and big braces and boing, boing. Rock on, Tommy. And what he does, he said, he's very proud of this. He said he's always a little bit pompous about his ideas generally. So this was no exception. So he's going, well, for example, you've got to think outside the box, creative thinking, not thinking by accountants. And so what I think is that the government should consider, getting rid of higher education and giving everybody in the country a subscription to YouTube Premium. University of Hull, Manchester, Oxford, Cambridge, University of Uttoxeter, University, please, Durham. Close your doors. And here is a subscription for YouTube Premium. Convert the universities into apartment buildings for rich people. Because they're lovely buildings, they're lovely, often red brick buildings. And the campuses stretch right throughout the towns. And they've got really good central locations. Just get rid of all higher education colleges. So everything. Like dog grooming colleges, where you learn how to groom a dog. Why bother learning how to groom a dog when you can look up it on YouTube? Why have a class that you go to for a year and become a professional dog groomer when you can look it up on YouTube? And with Premium, there's no adverts. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, right, that's a great idea. That's a really good idea. Well, you're entitled to that. It's not the world I want to live in. And luckily, I'm not going to be around much longer, and I'm very happy to not be. Because I think that the idea that everybody educates themselves in their bedroom, basement, bedsits, by looking at YouTube videos, is, well, I think it's the most ridiculous idea I've ever heard. And I don't think I need to explain why that is the most crass, puerile, infantile, stupid concept I've ever listened to. I am incredulous. A world in which we are left alone to watch YouTube videos and find our path. The educational establishment that was set up 300-400 years ago and that has proved to be the saviour of mankind, abandoned in favour of YouTube. Think about that.